So I want to give all praises and honor and glory to the only true God of heaven and earth, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Israel, whose true name is Yahweh, to his only begotten Son, the Messiah, the Lamb of God, that taketh away the sins of Israel by the shedding of his own blood, whose true name is Yahweh Shai, whom the world ignorantly calls Jesus, and double honors to my elders and teachers, and great millstone, and honors to all the prophets and teachers that carry the spirit of faith and the spirit of truth within them. My name is Zechariah. Hear my speech concerning the truth that is the word of the living God, which word pertains to you Israelites, which are you so-called Negroes, Hispanics, Latinos, and Native Indians, even you Israelites who may have the appearance of the heathen, who may have the identity of the heathen in this day and age, but are really descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And your faith serves as a sign and evidence that you may be an elect and that you are an Israelite. For the spirit of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai, the spirit of truth, have testified of old concerning how the faith, the just shall live by faith, concerning the faith of the election, or how faith is as a treasure being gathered. Even by the epistles of Paul, he have written of the elect of Israel, or how they are the sons of Abraham, for they follow after the pattern, the standard of faith. You know? So your faith, which is a gift, if you have it, if you believe, confide and trust in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai in these testimonies, then you may be an elect if you continue therein, and you are for sure an Israelite. Now, in the midst of all these crises upon earth, such as, this blackout, this power outage in Indiana, and the chaos that's brewing, these past, days, the anxieties of the people and the concerns of the people are being raised. And you have this lady on Twitter that made a statement. It's on my FYP. I don't follow her, but her name is Crowned Melanin One. Her head name, whatever you want to call it, is Queen Me. So it's a Judite woman in the Southern Kingdom woman. So she's crowning herself and she's calling herself a queen, right? But basically what she said was we all need to get emergency kits together ASAP. And this is gaining traction, this post, right? But the point is that, Jake, Jake's plan, actions, into preparation, into security and confidence, will fall short. Any initiative of Jake, that may be outside, or that is outside of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, will be insufficient. And that's the reality, man. Whether you stock up on food, you have your emergency kits, you stock up on weapons, it's all going to be insufficient. And what I seen this post and it reminded me of what is written in the book of Sirach chapter 40, which these things that I'm gonna read about, that I'm going to declare is sufficient. The things centered on Yahweh and Yahweh Shai. The things centered on his name, on his authority, his power. You know, these things is what's good for our souls. This is Sirach chapter, and this is not knocking down preparation, stocking up on food, or having different things on standby for the necessities and the evil times that draw near. But matter on the priority ultimately. The principal things. This is Sirach chapter. Well, the scriptures tell you, um, in all thy getting, get wisdom. So if there's anything to seek, if there's anything to labor for, if there's anything to gain, that you ought to gain, it's wisdom. Wisdom is the principal thing. This is the book of Sirach, chapter 40, verse 25. It says, "Go over, provide security, but good advice is better." Yeah, and in this truth, this knowledge, this wisdom, there is that which is most profitable above anything that a man can have. It provideth stability. It provideth life. And insight in in an advantageous way. Which really Yahweh Shai, the preaching, the testimony of Yahweh Shai, he is the center of it, and we ought not to forget that. We ought not to forget that, man. Above any practical, knowledge that we could get, Yahweh Shai is above that. Because surely I say, which came to my mind, which is true. The man who is practically at a disadvantage, useless, a lame man, may have more of an advantage in the evil days if he believeth, more than a man who is of healthy body, a strong body, who don't believe it. So, practical knowledge and skill is good, but what far exceeds that is the preaching of the cross, the testimony of Yahweh Shai, the knowledge of God, faith. Verse 26 says, "Wealth and strength gives confidence." Yeah, it offers security, protection, and an advantage. And these things are, what is these are standards of sufficiency, you know, you know. It says, "But the fear of the Lord can give you even more greater confidence." When you fear the Lord, you need nothing more. It is all the support you need. Yeah, and the fear of the Lord is more sufficient than wealth and strength. And that's the point of this lesson, where we have our sufficiency from God. Again, this is not to, reject, or to not deny, ourselves and you from that which is practical, you know? It's showing you the things that are principle, things that are more profitable, and you have need to lay hold upon the things that are principle. And if you want to do something practical, let it be, the second or the third, but the things centered around Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, that should be the utmost focus. It says the fear of the Lord is like a rich garden of blessings. You could not want a more glorious shelter, you know? So the fear of the Lord is a source of blessings. It faileth not. And we're in a time where this system, this economy, the things that we confide in, the food supply chain, the agriculture system, these things are going to fail. The cyber infrastructure, these things is going to fail. The things that people rely upon, people confide in, will fail. Right? But when it comes to the things that's centered on Yahweh Shai, these things cannot fail. Right? But that's going to be a short lesson. This lesson's edifying. I want to give all praises and honor and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. Shalom.